Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we will be covering the My Request module and the workflow. So to get started with the agenda for today, as in how we've bifurcated the entire webinar is into 5 different sections. So starting off with, we will be talking more about how to set up the My Request and what all configurations needs to be taken into consideration. More to it, we'll also be talking about how students can access the forms, fill them up and submit. Then comes in the school, where the school or the administrators who are involved in this complete process, who needs to verify or kind of given a clearance to all of those forms in order to go ahead or proceed with the placements. So review is something which we'll be talking about. And lastly is where once all the placements that have been confirmed, which needs to be published or displayed across to the students so they are aware as to what all placement details are shared across with them and what are the related activities that they need to do, right? And there are a few more other options such as move request or deleting a placement form, which we will be also covering while we proceed with the next slides. All right, so first and foremost, let's start off with the overview and setup. So when I consider or when I say this, my request as one of the wish list. So what exactly is my request is what we'll cover first. All right. So my request is one of the placement processes where the schools set up the forms which are published so that students can fill in and they can submit it back to the school, post which the school reviews, which in turn helps the student to secure their placements. All right. Now, when we talk about the form, so form basically is divided into multiple sections altogether, out of which again it varies school to school basis their requirements. But the best use case that we've come across so far, and what are the major components which make the form perfect in order to get all the required information, is actually displayed on the screen right away. So talking about the first section is the basic demographics or the information, as in where you capture the details of what area of specialization they would want to work into, what's the duration involved for that particular placement, and if it's going to be a part-time or full-time. Similarly, we come into the next section that is moreover about the site and location details or the specific information as to what's the parent site name, what's the details of the location with their address and other details. So you can check it in your database. Next comes in the clinician details. When we say about clinicians, it can be preceptors or instructors details that the students are submitting with the school so that they can review their details such as their name, their board certifications, license, and so on. Right. And more to it, if there is any specific location specific details or documents that needs to be uploaded by students, or if they need to get a few forms that needs to be duly signed by the preceptors or so on, which can also be configured within the form. All right, so that is how you can actually consider this my request to be as one of the other way to consider it is also called as a self placement form, where students go out hunt for their own placement and submit the request. All right, now the next step in here is when we talk about the my request as one of the wish list or the placement form in the system, what's the current workflow? So first and foremost, we will have to configure the form. All right, so this form ideally comes in two ways. We do have a exact standard form which can be readily used on the fly, but in case if there is any specific requirements or if you need to have any modification done, we can also cater to those customized forms which can be set up for your system as well. All right. So once the form have been selected, then you need to set up the my request, which we'll be talking through in upcoming slides, as in what all needs to be taken into consideration. So once you set up the form, the students have to fill it in. Once the student fill and submit it, now comes the part of school where they will have to review it, they'll have to confirm it and then process it further. Once everything is in line with your requirements, you need to create a placement. So that's the actual workflow, which is divided in 5 major steps. Right. Now, in the next slide, I will want to show you more about the sample. But before we go there, for your information, whenever we are talking about the my request form, say in case if you would want to customize your form, you would have to set up a call with us. So either one of us as a customer success specialist or our account managers team, one of them will actually review your current process and requirements. We will check if that is currently feasible to be accommodated. Most of cases it is yes feasible, it can be accommodated, but just in case to be on a safer side, we gather those requirements on an Excel template where we further process it to our configurations team who work on those forms and house it in your tenant account or the actual account which you'll be using. Okay. So before we proceed with anything further, whenever we are taking into consideration of the custom forms, we request our clients to give the requirements, we discuss it with them, we review it together, and we also seek a sign off so we get a confirmation that we can proceed with the setup. All right. So just for your information, for everybody's reference, so how an placement form would actually look like, or what are the major details or the components which comprises of those forms are actually displayed on the screen right now. So you can actually capture most of the details, such as, for what specific term or what specific semester is this particular placement for, or which course is it particularly related to, and so on. So furthermore to it, you can also capture your preceptor details. This is how it would kind of look like, just an example for everyone's reference. But as and when we proceed, I also have a screenshot which I'll be showing in the upcoming slides. But before we go there, I would also want to walk you through about how the exact standard template. Moreover, talking about the standard template, I would rather say the configurations form, which we usually discuss with all of the clients. So this is how it actually looks like. So whenever you would want to set up a custom form, we come across with this particular Excel template where we seek all the informations from you, such as if you see the main section, which is again bifurcated into multiple roles, such as, for example, the basic information section, wherein you will be capturing all of the details, as in which particular year is this placement related to, which term, which course, or what specialty, and so on, right? So those details can be captured under the basic section or basic information. Then comes in the major part, that is your location. So when we talk about the location, it's basically the patient care or the site where they actually got for their clinical experience. So what all details that you would want to capture is something which is displayed on the screen. And more to it, you can also let us know if there is any specific needs in terms of how you would want to capture the preceptor details as well. And lastly, if there is any sort of upload requirements, or if there is any template that you would want to share in the form itself, which the students can download, get it filled and duly signed. So even that can be managed within the form itself. All right. So that's more about it. And then talking more about the sheet, as in, say, if you would want a specific section to be a text only field, wherein if you want to just type in, it can be a comment box, or it needs to be a drop down which all the list which are pre-filled, which are shared with us beforehand, so we can configure them. So most of those options are configurable. So anything and everything that you would want to accommodate within that form can certainly be looked into, and we can discuss to see what best can be uh, configured and shared across with your students. All right. So that's more about how you would want to get your forms configured. And then talking about the statuses, right? So now that if we are considering the form, there might be multiple status that is also again related with the form. Say, for example, once the forms are submitted, so it's usually in the submitted status. Whereas you as a school or an administrator, when you start reviewing the forms, you might want to make changes to the status. So students are updated with the real-time changes that, or whatever work is being currently done on the form. So students are notified on timely manner. So in case if you would want to change that status with a specific color, even that can be managed. So the standard colors which are uh, currently set up with all the status is actually listed out on the screen, where you see the last column. It says, for example, if it is the one which is needs more information, it might be highlighted in an orange color, or if it is submitted for review, maybe yellow. So all of this color coding is actually listed out here, but in case if you would want to make changes to that, we can surely get that done. We can check with our team and we will try to accommodate those changes as well. But to your information, I would also want to let you know that most of the color coding that you currently see that's listed on the screen out here is very much in sync with the system setup that we currently have, because there are a lot of places in the system with different modules where you might see this color coding. So it's kind of kept constant throughout the system, so you don't get confused, point one, and secondly, to keep or to maintain the consistency throughout the system as well. All right. So this was more about the uh, request status that can be edited or customized. And these are the few examples, which was again part of the previous slide as well. All right. So now that we've discussed more about how, what is my request, how to set it up, what's the workflow, and how you can get those forms configured basis your requirement, let's quickly dive into the system screenshot as to where you can access the system and how that can be managed. All right. So now talking more about the my request setup. All right. So first and foremost, you either need to click on the placement on the quick menu panel on the right hand side, on the left hand side, or you can simply click on the placement tile under the placement management card on the main screen itself. So both of them are actually highlighted. So eventually, either ways, whatever icon that you click, it will redirect you to the placement section only. All right. So once you're in the placement section, so the main step here is either you can see all the course offerings that you've created in the system will start showing up on the main screen out here. But in case if you would want to pull up for a specific course, you can always make use of the search bar to type in the course number or name. So only that specific course will show up on the list. And you can simply click on the name, which is a clickable link, which redirects you to the next step of that particular course and the placement related functionalities, right? So this is one way of managing your uh, course. But in case if you have multiple courses and if you would also want to group them, there is a placement group functionality wherein you can create a group and club two or more courses together, and you can always make use of placement for groups to see what all rotations have been added to them, what are the wish lists that have been activated, and so on. So it's like a group functionality where multiple course offerings can be viewed at one single screen itself. So that comes in real handy if you have multiple rotations throughout that term, and you can manage it on the same screen itself, right? So say now let's consider this uh, course to be one of our examples for today, and I click on the clinical practice 6, and that opens up to the next page basically, where you can see all the details of that specific course, uh, mostly talking about the placement front. So it starts from the left to right setup. So on the top we have this wish list tab. All right. So first and foremost, you need to click on the wish list tab, which will open up to this screen. Considering this to be a new course that's been added to your system, in such scenarios, this page would ideally be blank. You might not see so many options that you currently see here, but I have purposely kept it this way so that I can also show you, say, if you're coming back to the same course for a new rotation, and if you would want to fetch previous details, you can also be able to see it on the same screen with the current status as well. Say for example, one of the forms has a closed status, whereas the one with an open status is something which we'll be working on, and if you've set it up for a future date, that also shows up as an upcoming one. All right. Say, let's consider now for this particular instance that we want to create a new wish list. You have this plus create wish list tab towards the right top corner. You need to click on to that, which will open up to a section where first and foremost you need to add the wish list name. All right. By wish list name, when I refer to this, is basically the name which both you and the students will be able to see when you're working with the specific wish list. And the best practice is to always include the necessary information to identify, such as say cohort, course number, or rotation dates. So it's easily understood or identified both by the school or by the students as well. All right. So once you've added the name, then comes in the main section where you have to actually manage the dates. So when we talk about the dates, this specific section, which is currently highlighted now, has three different dates, that is view date, open date, and close date. So there is a specific differentiating factor for all three of them. So ideally, when I say view date, is this specific date is before your wish list actually opens. Okay, so this will allow your students to view the options that will be included in this particular wish list. So they can start working beforehand and they can be prepared with their information, so they can gather all the required info. So whenever the form opens, they can start working on it and they will be able to complete it before time, or maybe they will be proactively ready to start working on any of the placement forms that will be activated for them. All right. And very similarly, we have this open date. The second option that you see here is basically the date when students will be allowed to begin selecting and kind of start working on their specific form that they have to fill in and submit for their self preference, or where they would want to go out for the clinicals, right? And then we have the close date. So self explanatory, again, close date is like a due date. So which basically means student need to complete their submissions before the date that's kind of mentioned by the school or set up by the school. So it's like a deadline for them to complete their activity of submitting their request. And then we also have like a different type of wish list, but since we are focusing on the my request setup, you need to ensure that you're selecting the radio button of my request. So once you have filled up all of this basic details on the first step, you need to click on next, and that will take you to the next section where you will have to basically select the form that's been set up. So as you see here, there are two options in this specific screenshot. Say the one that's currently highlighted is the exact my standard my request standard form. So this form basically allows you to start working on to this my request functionality right away without any sort of dependency. So initially, before we had this specific form in here, there was kind of a dependency on the clients wherein they had to get this created first. So that was like a prerequisite for them to start using my request. But now it's not that case. So you can actually just pick up the form that is already available. You can start working onto it. But in case if you feel you need some changes to it, we can always accommodate those changes as well. All right. And once you've selected the form, you need to ensure how many submissions students are allowed to make for this specific form. So it has two different sections, minimum required and maximum allowed. So you can set the threshold as an administrator. So say for example, minimum being 1 and maximum being 3. So students are allowed to submit with the same form 3 times. So once they've completed or have reached that threshold, the system will prompt an error stating that the maximum allowed number was 3 and you cannot submit any more request. So that's where you can manage. And then comes in the instructions. So instructions is like a guideline or a stepwise approach that you would want to let your students know even before they start working onto this form. So they stay informed beforehand in case if there is any need of a specific upload or any sort of document that needs to be kind of signed and re-uploaded. So all of them can be actually managed under the instructions. And once you've added and managed all of this basic configurations, you need to click on next, and the next step will allow you to select the students. When I say students, they don't populate automatically. This is backed by the registrations. So you need to register the students to the courses for which you are activating this specific form, right? So in this case, we have 4 different students that you currently see on the screen. So there is a multi-select option which will automatically select all the students in the list. But in case if you would want to exclude one of them, you can uncheck the box so that specific student need not work onto this. Say if they've already secured a placement, you created it directly in the system and you don't want to go ask them to go through the process again, you can simply unselect this. So that can be done also. And other than that, we have this checkbox on the top, which is very beneficial in case if you have ad hoc registrations happening to a particular course. This will save your time from having to manually update the wish list if any new students are added to the same course again. Say in case out of these 4 students, wherein you've already published this, you've added a new student, the fifth one. The student does not get automatically selected if this specific bit is not checked. In this case, you have to come back to the section and again check mark the box so that the students are able to see the form and they can start working on it. Once you make a wise decision, or if you want to select automatically, or if you want to select them individually or manually, you can just do so, and then you need to click on the next button. So by clicking on to next button, it takes you to the important component of the setup, which is the notification part. So all sort of email notifications can be controlled on this step itself while you are configuring the form. All right. So first and foremost, we have the setup notification. So this will allow you to check mark those boxes. So this is the generic communication which we usually suggest our clients to keep them enabled, since it keeps your students notified. So it basically means you're notifying whenever the my request form is open, or it will also notify them 24 hours before the closure show, so they are kind of informed and they can start working faster on the form. They can expedite the process if there is any sort of delay. And also, once the form is closed, when the deadline is done, then the system will also trigger a notification that the wish list is now closed. All right. So that's the first step of the notification. And then we have the status notification for students. If you would want to notify them, say for example, on the front of the overall progress or the overall status, you can choose to set up, say for example, under overall, if you would want to say under review, or if the placement is confirmed, or if they need more information, any of such status, if selected, if you want to notify them, you can select those. The system allows you to multi-select those specific status. Similarly applies for the compliance, location, contract, and preceptor as well. And every section has their own set of drop downs with different values, so you can select what option you would want to select. All right. In most of cases, the best way to manage this is you might want to let your students know or notify them whenever the form is under review, or if the placement is confirmed, or if you need more information. So that's the best check mark that you can actually pick from all of the options that you have in here. All right. So after this point, you can also choose to notify school in case if you want to send out any email notifications for the internal team as well. You can choose to set up the notification by check marking this box and clicking on add notification. So when you click on add notification, it will similarly give you the same status types such as overall, compliance, location, contract, and preceptor. You can choose to select which status you want to notify the school as well, and the course faculty who has been associated for this specific course will also show up in the list, so you can also notify them. And in case if you want to notify additional recipients, the system does allow you to add additional recipients as well. All right. So that's about how you can notify students and school on different status updates. And lastly, in case if you would also want to notify them whenever a comment has been added by a student or by school itself. All right. So either ways, if there are any notifications or the comments added, you can also choose to notify them basis this specific requirement as well. All right. So once we've set up this email notifications, I would quickly want to show the setup again. So the first option was the three basic fields, which is the best recommended option to keep them enabled. So you can always check mark those three. Then we have the notify students and schools. So this is one of the examples that I wanted to show. So in the previous section, since it was blank, so now you can see, say in case if I want to notify students when the overall status says placement confirmed. So whenever you select this particular status, the system will automatically trigger an email notification to students. All right. Similarly goes for compliance. I've selected two options. If it's marked as approved, or if it needs more information, it will notify student. So that is how you can set up which status you want your students to be notified about. And similarly goes to the school as well. All right. Say it's the same status type which you can select under the school option as well. Similarly goes for the status. And like I mentioned previously, the system auto picks the course faculty name as well. And in case if you wish to add any additional recipient, you can simply click on the plus icon to add the next or the additional recipient as well. All right. Similarly goes for the status. So this is the comment section. All right. So say in case if there has been any comment added by student or by school, you can simply check mark this and you can choose to again add an additional recipient in this section as well. right? This is one of the sample notifications or the email notification sample copy. So this is how the email would look like in case if there has been any change in the status. It will trigger a notification to the student with this basic or well framed email that will have the overall status change to say in progress for a specific location and the placement details. So this is how it would look like. And I have one more screenshot, say in case if there has been a contract departments are actually working on to the location contract feasibility. So they are checking onto it and they've come across a contract where they've sent it to site, but it's currently under review. So you've actually updated that status, and the status actually has been marked as one of those status where you want to generate a notification. This is how the notification would look like. Okay. Now, the next step is like the last step where you can uh, review all the configuration setups that you've done so far, all the selections that you've made in the last 4 steps. If you feel anything is missing or anything needs to be changed, you can anytime click on the back button and it'll take you to that specific section. You can make those changes, come back to this section and just click on save. By clicking on to save, it will actually create a wish list and it will start populating on the screen like the way you currently see. So for example, for this specific course, we had a wish list which was created previously, but since it's past the due date, like say for example April 30th, so the status is closed. This is the fresh one which again has been enabled with the view date of say June 18th and the close date of June 30th. So this is currently within the cycle, so it has this open status. Okay, so this is where you can easily identify and you can always choose to see the status or you can choose to edit it again. More to it, if you would want to preview how the form looks like, you have this preview functionality, which again is part of one of our recent enhancement that is coming to this specific section, along with the delete option as well. So this delete functionality was previously not applicable. You had to actually raise a ticket to our before support, but now to get rid of those activities, we've also come up with this feature where in case if it's no longer required or if you created it by mistake, you can simply click on delete with the trash bin icon and it will erase that specific entry from this section itself. Okay, now I would quickly want to show you the standard format or the standard form that we've currently come up with. This is how the form looks like. Like I was mentioning, there are multiple sections that altogether comprises in one specific form, which makes it or calls it as my request. You can see that the first section is basic information where students can type in what specialty they would want to work into, how many number of hours that they have to complete necessarily to for this particular placement, and the location details and instructor details. So I've kept it as instructor because this is again not specific to nursing domain only, but this forms can also be used by other domains. So say they call preceptors as instructors or fieldwork educators or so and so forth. So there are multiple naming for the for this specific section, and it can be renamed basis your requirements. And within this section, wherever you see the label with an asterisk with the red mark is something which is mandatory, which again can be decided by the school if you want to keep any specific detail mandatory or a non-mandatory field. All right. Now moving into the next part of the form. So we've kept a few default upload functionalities where students can upload a few forms which are duly signed by the preceptors or by the sites. So this can actually be managed within the same form, which further school can review whenever the students have uploaded and submitted to the school for review. Okay, so this is how you can actually set up the wish list and it comes in handy. So anything in terms of setting it up, do we have any questions so far? So
So the question is, we are a PT program who
mhm.
uses slot location based wishlist currently. Is using my request an alternative for this?
Ideally, I would say no, because in terms of my request, you are allowing your students to go hunt for their own placements and submit their request. Whereas in terms of either the location or slot based wish list, you've already secured those slots or the availability from the site partners and you've entered them in the system, wherein the students are actually picking the slots that you published for them to select and rank their preference. So it's two different approaches basically. If you want to we want your students to go look out for their placements by themselves, that's the best way to manage it through my request. But if already received any sort of confirmation on slots or availability, I would recommend to use it with the slots and location based wish list as it is set up right now. Now let's talk about how students can view them, how they can access the form, how they need to fill it up, and so on, right? So within the student's view, I would want to firstly show once the students have received their logins, they've activated their accounts, and once they've accessed the system, this is how the system would actually look like. This is the dashboard of the student's login. This is default for all the students who have access to the system. Okay. So first and foremost, in order to get started with the My Request form, they need to click on the coursework tile that is currently highlighted on the screen or the screenshot. Okay, so there are two ways to do it. One is you can click on the coursework, or you can also click onto these three lines on the left top corner, which again gives you the same set of menu. Either ways, it will take you to the same section of coursework or the course activities. So the next section, once you click on coursework, all right, so it opens up to this section where you can see the placement with the bifurcation if that specific course requires placement or not. Firstly, now, since this is a placement course, it will always be under the requires placement tab. Under this section, you will be able to see the course name, which term it is specifically for, and what are the placement details with the start and end date. Okay. So once this is done, you can also see the details of that specific form by clicking on to view details. It opens up to this specific section where you get this button which says add request along with the minimum and maximum allowed threshold that was set initially when you're configuring the form. Okay, and that can be changed anytime. It's not a showstopper. You can always change that number basis your requirements. It's on the it's visible on the screen on the front end itself. Okay, now, once they click on this add request, the students will be able to see the same form which we were discussing in our previous slides. Okay, so in this specific section again, so I have actually minimized all the headers or the sections of the form so we can see them all together. So it starts with the instruction tab. So instruction by default is within that blue banner on the top. It has this view instruction tab which can be clicked with a clickable link. It opens up to a drawer where you can see all the instructions that have been added. So these are the same instructions which I was referring to as wherein you can add those guidelines or steps which student needs to follow whenever they want to start working on their form. All right. Then we have this different sections which within the form, such as basic, location, instructor or preceptor. And then we have the document upload along with any additional questions. So all they need to do is they can just click onto this drop down. It opens up to the form with those fields. They can start entering the details within that section. Okay. So now once this is filled, let's quickly see how one of those sections look like. Okay. So now I've clicked on the drop down for this specific basic information. It opens up with different fields where now I can type in what specialty or area of professional interest I want to work in. Right. I will also submit the number of hours or the duration that I need to complete. Then the location details. So like I mentioned, anything with an asterisk is a important or a mandatory field without which the system will throw an error and they need to definitely add these details before they submit the form. Okay, so the next section ideally is about the instructor as well or the preceptor, wherein they can fill in the details with such as first name, last name, email, their license number. This can again be customized. This is just a standard format for the demo purpose or just for the webinar purpose today. Okay, so this is customizable for your information. And the next step is the comments. So within this section, once the form has been filled up or has been saved, if they want to add in any comment for the school, they can also type in the comment as well. And whenever they add in a comment, it gives a text box where they can type in the comment and save, and it actually shows up on the screen as well. Okay, now say once the students have filled up the entire form with all the necessary details and information, they can either choose to save it. Okay, say for example, there is one of the document which is yet to be signed by a preceptor and then they have to upload it. Okay, in such scenarios, they can actually save this as a draft. So if you carefully see on the right top corner, you have clear all, save and submit. So save button is ideally to save the work in progress that they've currently done. It saves as a draft with partial data that they've inputted in this form. Okay, in case if they want to start the form fresh by erasing all the details that they've entered so far, they can also make use of the clear all functionality that will erase the entire details that the students have filled. This is within the student login itself. Okay, and then comes in the submit, which is like the last functionality on the screen. So that will allow you to submit the form that you've filled in. And I would also want to throw some light on the submission functionality here is students have to be mindful, because once they submit this form, they no longer have access to edit this form again. Okay, it's either the school or the administrator who can access this form, can edit students' response on their behalf if there is any minor change in name or any other details. If not, the school has to completely delete the form or ask the students to rework on the entire data. Okay, so that's how you can control the form submissions for the students. All right, so now the student has submitted the form with all the required details. So within the student section itself, they will be able to see that they've submitted the my request for TC216 course with this specific location, say Aspera Greenville, and the preceptor details as well. So all of this details is visible in here, along with the status that you see which says submitted. So submitted is basically when now this particular form is in the school's purview. So they have to now start working on it. They have to start reviewing it. Okay. So now let's move into the school review part. All right. So school reviewing functionality is ideally again from the same administrator login. So you need to go back to the same section, or in case if you're providing the process my request style to your faculties as well, even they can work instead. I mean, when I say there are two different sections or two different logins, so as an administrator, you have this end-to-end access to your system. But in case if you're also allowing your faculties to work on this process, my request, upon requesting us, either the customer success specialist or the account managers, you can also reach out to our V4 support. So by just letting them know, we might be able to get this particular tile enabled for faculty login as well. All right. So now, in order to start reviewing the form as an administrator, you can again access it within this particular placement management card. You have this process my request style, where you can process all the placement requests that are submitted by the students. The same option is also applicable or is available under the left hand side quick menu panel. You just need to click on any of them, and that will take you to the dashboard by default, where you will be able to see the graphical representation of all the form statuses, right? So currently there are total 4 requests that have been submitted, and out of which there are kind of 0 not started maybe, or 3 not started. So it depends on how many students are registered for that course, how many have submitted it, how many are yet to start, are yet to uh, start working on them or have saved them as draft. Accordingly, those status will change, and all the color coding are actually given on the screen itself. And a point to note in here is all the graphical representation is a clickable link, and it will redirect you to the data of that specific student's data. If say for example I have 3 students in not started, I click on that specific tab, it will redirect me to a new page where I can see those 3 students with the details as to who have not started, and maybe you can try and reach out to them and check in as to why it's still pending. Okay, so this comes in real handy if you would want to see the data in a graphical representation. More to it, you can always view the dashboard basis rotations which are upcoming or current. Okay, so it's completely to your choice, but by default the system always brings you to dashboard and upcoming always. Okay, then in order to proceed further with the actual form review, you can click on all request on the top. There is a tab all request on the top left hand side. You need to click onto this. By default upcoming and current is selected. You can see all the name of the students for the course they've been registered to and what are the current status. So as you see in this screenshot, for the first student in here, the student has just submitted, so overall status currently is submitted. Okay, whereas for the other status for the contracts compliance or preceptor, right, so it's currently blank. The reason being, you need to start working onto it as a faculty or as an administrator to update the status, which we'll be covering in the next steps. Okay, now the next point or the important bit here is under the action tab, you have 2 options to view the form. Okay, so the basic differentiating factor out here is if you click onto this view, it will open up the form on the same page itself. Okay, say in case if you want to go a step back, you might have to access it in a duplicate tab, or you'll have to close that entire drawer and then access the other details. Whereas the pop out icon or this arrow icon, that will open this particular form in a new tab. The benefit here is you can have all the details as is on the previous page. Along with that, in case for example say if you've applied any of the filters, so the filters also stay valid, so you don't have to kind of apply those filters again and again to view any specific data, because you are managing it on a separate tab altogether. Okay, so that comes in super handy in case if you are using the arrow icon to pop out into a new window. Okay, perfect. Now let's move into the next section. So as an administrator or a faculty, when you click onto a form, all right, so it opens up to the details that the students have filled in and submitted. Okay. Now in this case, the student name along with the course details and the placement details show up here with the latest status that is currently submitted, because students have just submitted it and the school is yet to start reviewing it and has to start working on it. Okay, so all the details that the student have submitted, say let that be basic information or location information, all of them start showing up on the screen here, and the school can start updating the status basis. Say now it is submitted, and if you would want to update it to overall status as in progress, you can choose to update that status as well. Okay, so here is the screenshot of the responses that you see on the right hand side. So now that it's in submitted, if you've started working on it, you might want to mark it as in progress so students get notified on timely manner. Okay, so once you've updated the status, you would want to search the location. So now students might submit the location details as a fresh location, which might be not part of your database as of today, or might also be part of your database. It can be either of cases, but you might want to search it first before you link the location, because the reason being, most of cases students might not enter the name correctly, they might use a short form, but you already have that data in the system. So to check it with more details, it's always better to click on search location. Okay, by clicking on to search location, if there is any specific location with any of the details that has been submitted by the student, it will pull up in the list and you can simply choose to select that specific location and you can save, which will automatically link that specific location if it's already part of your database. If not, you have this advanced search. All right, I would suggest, say in case instead of Aspira group, maybe the student has just submitted Aspira or maybe some other name as AG. Okay, so it might be the same details, but the name has been mentioned incorrectly by a student. So instead of you creating a duplicate entry of the same site in your database, you can actually check it with other validating parameters such as address, city, zip, or other details that is actually submitted by the student. Okay, so this is one way to search. And in case after making that search, specific search, if you find that entry in the system, you can select it and you can click on to save. Once you click on to save, that specific location gets linked to this particular form and you will be able to see the contract as well. Okay, say within the contract, if there's been some changes or if it's currently under review or if there are any further modifications required, even that can be considered, and you can mark the location contract to in progress or maybe is not approved as yet. So there are multiple status again within this section as well. Okay, and by chance if you've selected a wrong location for some reason, and if you've noticed it that okay, I've selected a wrong location and I would want to update it again, you can just simply click on update location and that will open up to the same section that we saw in the previous slide. And once you've made these changes or you've selected the correct location, update the status and click on the update. So the status keeps on updating every next time whenever you're working. And if anyone else who is trying to access the form, even they can see the details as well. Okay. And the next step is to now map the preceptor or the instructor. So in this case, the instructor details that the students have submitted. So in this case, requested clinical instructor or preceptor by student is Dr. Amelie. Okay, and with the email ID. In case if this particular preceptor is already part of your system, very similar to the search location functionality in the previous section, it will start showing up in here, and you should be able to see the name. If not, the system also allows you to add clinical instructor on the same page itself. Once you click on add instructor, the page will, I mean, a new drawer opens up with all the information that is submitted by students and is pre-filled in those specific sections again. Say the student has submitted the first and last name, I need not add them again. The system automatically populate the details with all the submissions that the student has done. More to it, if you would want to add or edit any more details, you can always do that as an administrator or a faculty. You can update additional details, or if you just have that specific basic details as of now, you can simply click on save. Okay, so once you click on save, so you have this option to map documents as well. So this is one of our recent enhancements that we've come up with, and it's been a long ask by multiple schools. So in this case, what happens is if students are submitting a preceptor CV, their licensure, or any board certification, or any random or miscellaneous documents. So all of those documents can be mapped right on the fly when you're adding this specific preceptor to the system. So the benefit here is all the documents that you're mapping at this specific section will be part of the preceptor profile, and it will be associated. Say if there is a preceptor agreement that you might want to check maybe a year from now, right? So you don't have to hunt anywhere else in the system. You can simply go into that specific preceptor profile, and you should be able to see it under the document section or any other section that it's been mapped under. All right. And one point to note in here is the CV gets replaced and others gets keep on adding like multiple documents. But since CV has a limitation to just add one, if there is a CV already present and if the student is submitting and updating one, it will replace the CV. So you might have to be careful if you're updating it. So just check it once. If not, if it's a new preceptor altogether, then I don't think it should be a problem. You can simply click on save. Okay. Now, the next section, once you've selected the preceptor and linked it to this particular placement, you should ensure that all the status on the right hand side are updated accordingly. So you have the real-time status with what is the current state of this specific form. Okay. Now let's move into the next bit of the comments. So again, it's a generic communication form. If all the comments, let that be the student that's added or if school is added, all of them start showing up in the section. It's pretty similar to how students submit them. You need to click on that plus icon. It opens up to a drawer where you can type in the content, and if you would want to share this comment with the student, you can just check mark this box, or if you want to keep it for internal purpose only, you can just uncheck it. Or by default it's not check mark, but you can always check mark that specific bit. Okay, so that is how you can manage the comments as well, and all the comments that you add will start showing up in here in this specific section. And if you can recall, initially I had mentioned that the students cannot edit the form once they have submitted. In case if there are any minor changes or anything the student has highlighted in terms of changes that needs to be done in the form, as an administrator or a faculty who has access to this form, they should be able to update any wrong information or minor correction is required, since student cannot access the form to edit them again. Okay, so that's the benefit of having that edit student response on the right top. Lastly, once you've made those changes, this is how it would open up. It's the same form that the students have filled in. Say you just want to make changes if they've by mistake, if they've added a wrong state, so you can just update that state and you can just save and close the form, so it will capture the updated information. Okay, now once you've created this, or if you've checked this particular form, everything is fine, or maybe say in the due course, maybe the student drops out, or if this is not a valid request, you might want to delete the specific form, the student can start reworking on it. By clicking onto those three dots on the extreme right top corner, the system gives you an option to delete the request as well. So just clicking onto that delete will not simply delete, it will prompt you with a validation box. You will see a number, you just have to type it in. So it's like to ensure it's not a robotic activity, but you're taking a wise decision to delete it again. So you might have to enter that number again before you delete it. All right. So this is how you can actually review the form as an administrator when the students have submitted. So any questions so far from what we've covered? Because after this, we'll be covering how to publish the placement as well.
I'm not seeing any questions, Namit.
Mhm.
Let's
All
give
right,
like 10
perfect.
seconds and maybe you can continue after that just to see if somebody will post a question.
Okay. All right. So if there are no questions in the interest of time, I think I can proceed with the next step. We'll be continuously monitoring the question box in case if there are any, we can stop to answer them. But I'll just proceed with the next section. So now, once you review the form and everything looks fine, you might want to create this placement and publish it for the student. So that will ideally be the last step of reviewing the form and creating a placement. How do you create a placement is within the same form. Once everything is approved in line with your requirements, no further changes required, the last step ideally would be to click on the create placement tab on the right top corner. So once you click on the create placement, it opens up to this section where system will show all the details of the current request When I say current request, is basically the course to which the particular student has been registered for, which is the placement or the rotation details for which you are creating this placement. Okay, and the course details as well. Okay, so when I say course details, is basically the course offering that's been created in the system along with the rotation. So it has all the basic required details that you might want to recheck before you create the placement. Okay, and once you see that everything is fine, you will have to click on the next button, and that takes you to this placement configuration page or the placement setup page, where most of the details are pre-filled or auto-populated. But the mandatory field, or I would ideally recommend at this point, is to have the settings associated for the placement. Okay, so you can clearly differentiate if this particular student, maybe the student has two different placements, or there are two students with same name, so there can be a lot of confusion. So you can always have that bifurcated with having the best of information while you're creating the placement. So the best way to manage it ideally is to have the setting associated. So in this case, I've selected acute care as one of the setting. All right, I've chosen the clinical instructor, which again is a default action the system automatically picks because I've linked the preceptor in my previous step. I can now choose to associate a placement faculty, someone within the school who might be monitoring them or who might be with them throughout the clinical to assist them from the school side. All right. And lastly, if there are any notes that you would want to share with the students, or if you would want to keep it for internal use, there are two different tabs. You can simply type in those content in there with the description, and you can start placing the student. Okay. Now, before we proceed any further, I would want to throw some light on a new feature that we've come up with again as an enhancement. So on the right top corner, say in case if you would want to make some changes, you always have that previous button. You can go a step back, review the details, and come back to this section again. But if you feel everything is fine, you can now do two steps. All right. Either you can just place them, which will not send out any publication or any sort of notification. So placing them ideally is still restricted as an administrator profile or a faculty profile, because the final step is still due, which is to publish the details. So now, if you would want to complete this process at this step itself, I would recommend to click on place and publish, so that saves on to your future task. All right. But if you have a lot of placements wherein you're creating the placement, and if you might want to notify them all together in one go, you can just click on place. Okay, either ways, I'll also show you the traditional approach of to publishing the placements separately. But if you would want to publish it from the same step, you have the button right here on the top. Okay, now once, say for example, you've placed it, I would want to show you like how the placement notification would looks like. Okay, so this is the email that the students receive when the placement has been confirmed by the school. It carries just the basic template with all the required details of the site, the location, which rotation they've been placed for, and what are the rotation or the placement dates, along with the setting and the clinical instructor. If I would have added any notes, that notes would also show up in here. Okay, so this is how you can uh, set up the notification setup as well. All right, now let's go into the, okay, sorry. Okay, so let's go into the next step. So in the next step, let's talk about the publishing placement. So in case if you are not one of those who would want to publish it right away, but then you want to do it together for all students in one go, you might have to follow the traditional approach in that case. So in this case, you will have to click on placement, okay, on the dashboard or from the quick menu panel. And once you click on the placement option, you might have to hunt for the courses. If you have a lot of courses in your laundry list, I would recommend to simply type in the name or number, and the system will automatically pull up the specific course that you're looking for. Okay, or if you've created groups, you might also click onto that groups, and it will only populate those courses which are added under a specific placement group. Okay, so in this case we are considering this clinical practice 6, so I just select that particular course. And just like how we started off with the wish list initially while setting up the my request, now you have to select email and publish. Okay, so email and publish will allow you to select the rotation. You will have to be very mindful or careful when you're selecting the rotation, because there are high chances if you have multiple rotations, you might not be able to see the placement. So it's ideally recommended to have the correct rotation selected. Once you select the rotation, the number of placements that have been done will start populating on the screen right here. Okay, so in this case, just for the webinar purpose today, we've created one placement. The details of location, the student name, and the placement details show up in here. Now what needs to be done is, if you have one or more placements, you can simply check mark the first box that will select all the placements. But say instead, if you, or otherwise if you just want to select one or two from the list, you can also check mark them. Once you select the names or the placements, the options of placement, publish placement and compose email highlights. Okay, what now needs to be done is, if you click onto this placement, publish placement, it will automatically publish the placement and you should be able to see the latest status out here. Okay, but to keep in mind, the latest status that you see here is just the published placement. In case if you're publishing the placement, please be sure that it will not automatically trigger an email, but instead you'll have to also click on compose email to send out the email as well, because this does not generate any sort of notification. This will only be visible to students once they log into their system only. Okay, so this is something which needs to be taken into consideration. And once you send out any sort of emails, you can also be able to see the email dashboard with the real-time status, if it's been delivered or not, with the other status as well. Okay, and for some reason you publish the placement, but then you realize, oh, by mistake, if this was done, or if you would want to unpublish it for some other reason, you have this three dots on the right hand side just besides email dashboard. If you click onto it, you can also be able to unpublish the placements that you've done so far. Okay, or for a specific student as well. Now that's more about how you publish the placement. And lastly, we also have this move request functionality. So moving a request basically is within the same form. You need to follow the same steps of accessing process my request, clicking on the view function under the actions tab. It Within the form you have this three dots. There is a move request option. Okay, so in case, okay, so why is this required? Basically, say in case if there is any change that happens, and the students request that the initially submitted form now needs to be moved to some other rotation. So instead of doing it all together as a fresh form, you can also manage to move it to a different rotation altogether within the same section again. So it makes it a bit easier for the administrators. So you don't have to go back and start verifying all of those details again, because it's just a change of rotation and not an entire form submission. So in this case, whenever you're moving the request, you need to keep in mind that the requests are moved only if the same form is used by the other courses where you want to move this particular placement request for. Secondly, the my request form should also be enabled for the course where you are planning to move this particular placement. Okay, now let's go into the next section. I would want to show how that looks like. So once I click on move request, the system will prompt you with the current request details of the current rotation and placement details. And you have this blue banner again, where system will let you know that in case if there is no course created, it will surely show up that, that particular entry will not show up. You might have to go back, create that particular rotation, enable that specific entries, and that's the only time when the system will prompt you to move it to a different uh, rotation cycle or placement cycle. So for example, in this case, this was for say June or July month, but I want to move this for the next cycle. So in this case, I want to move it for the next one, which is starting August 1st. So I can automatically make that changes within this particular section itself. Okay. Once I select it, I just need to simply click on move, and this particular request will be moved to a new rotation altogether. All right, so this actually completes the entire workflow of the my request. And we also have a few help center articles which allows you to go through and see the stepwise approach of how to set up my request, how to review my request. So this comes in super handy in case if you face any challenges while you're setting it up by yourself. Of course, our team is there to assist you, but in case if you would want to go through a few help articles which are available, you can always access the files that are shared with you, right? So any questions so far, now that we've completed the entire module? So I would just want to check with Kanti once if there are any questions.
No questions, Namit.
All right, perfect. Okay, so just to keep you updated, so in case if you just started attending this series, I would also, and if you'd also want to catch up on the previous webinars, we have this link shared in here. You can always access it and you can go through the previous webinars as well. We also have the next session that is coming up, which is scheduled on Thursday for June 27th, and we'll be covering the student preference or the wish list section of the product, right? And I would like to thank you all so much for taking your time to learn about the product today. And last request is to please take a minute to complete a short survey and allow us to help improve in terms of any changes or any requests that you have in terms of webinar. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Namit. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Have a good day. Thank you.